Greetings, psychology students. Today we are going to be talking about motivation and emotion. So what you're going to see here are a series of pictures designed to elicit a response from you. That one's my favorite. Parfaits have layers too. So, what motivates you to eat? Is it a physiological or a physical factor, or is it a psychological or a mental factor? Could it be a combination of both? Those pictures in the previous slide, did they make you hungry? If they did, then you were psychologically rather than physically motivated. And that's what we're going to get into with today. We're going to talk a lot about hunger, but we'll talk about some other things too. So, motivation. It is an internal state that motivates behavior and directs it towards a goal. It is not strength, but desire that moves us, right? Motivation is your uh, either internal or sometimes you can have external motivation that's pushed upon you, right? But it's a state that allows you or activates behavior and directs you towards that goal. So there are four different theories of motivation and where it comes from. One is that it is instinctual. The other is that it's a biological or drive reduction theory. The Another says that it's all based on incentives, and then the last one is talking about cognitive, and we'll break all of these down. So, the instinct theory. We are motivated by a variety of instincts. These are innate tendencies that determine behavior. They're innate, they're part of us, they are what they are. This is from the early 1900s, and it doesn't do anything to explain behavior. It just labels it, right? It says, people do these things. Like, why is people doing these things? Well, people is doing these things because um, because they're it's there, it's innate, it's an instinct, right? So it doesn't explain why we do these things, it just says that we do and says, hey, here's the label, it's an instinct. Then we have drive reduction theory, which says that we have needs and those needs produce drives, right? This is an internal condition that orients an individual towards a specific goal. For example, biological needs drive us to action. We're motivated or driven to reduce those needs. So the drive of hunger, right, drives us to eat. Fatigue, right? Being tired drives us to go to sleep, to rest. So the drive reduction theory says that our behaviors, our motivation is entirely tied to these physical needs, these physical drives. And and this again, right? It focuses on physical or physiological needs. But it's more than just a drive, right? And we know that it's more than just drives because infant attachments to their mothers are not based on physical drives, right? Drive reduction theory, like hunger and thirst, is good, but Harlow proved that a loving, comforting touch or contact comfort motivates monkeys much more than hunger or thirst. So they created two little mom dolls, right, for this baby monkey. One mom doll has food and warmth, and the other mom doll has a little comfy blanket that's wrapped around it and a monkey-like face, right? The baby monkey will hang out with the one that has food only long enough to eat, and then we'll go straight back to the comforting doll, right? So there's more to it than just drives, right? Our motivations are more than just physiological drives. Incentives, right, are these things that we learn to value, and they are key to motivation. So that leads us, of course, to incentive theory. Now, incentives are external stimulus. They're a reinforcer or a reward that motivates behavior, right? And drives and incentives work together. Hunger might cause you to walk to the cafe, right? That's the drive, the need to eat, right? But the incentive to go to that cafe is the cheesesteak, right? If there were no such, if it were just drives, then we'd all eat oatmeal and we'd be fine with it, right? The incentive is there too. There's other pieces at work. And then last but not least, we're going to talk about cognitive theory. And that says that actions are the result of intrinsic and extrinsic motivations. Intrinsic motivations are things that come from inside of you, right? We engage in behaviors because they are personally rewarding, right? We enjoy doing them. That's intrinsic motivation. And then there's extrinsic. It comes from the outside. We engage in behaviors that reduce biological needs or help us obtain incentives or are externally rewarding, right? That we get rewarded for doing this action by a force or a power outside of ourselves. So in school, some of us will be extrinsically motivated. I'm not going to do my work if I'm left on my own devices. But if the teacher's there breathing down my neck, telling me that I need to get to work and use this class, I'm effectively, all right, extrinsic motivation. I don't want to get yelled at. I'm going to do my work. Well, if there is no teacher there, right, then it's intrinsic motivation, and I might not be intrinsically motivated to do my homework. Maybe I really don't care about it, and I think it's dumb, right? So intrinsic motivation versus extrinsic motivation is something that not only do you guys already understand just by being human beings and existing in the world, but you also understand by being students in school, right? So what's going on? We are trying to satisfy our needs, right? There are biological needs, physiological requirements necessary for survival, things our body needs to do. For example, sleeping, using the bathroom, eating food, all of this stuff has to happen or you cannot continue to exist, right? Biological needs that your body is saying, fulfill these or I will die. And then there are social needs, psychological needs acquired through learning and through experience, right? Things that we need beyond just the physical existence of our bodies. Interestingly enough, studies have showed that obese people eat not because of an out of balance biological need, but because of external or social cues. And that is that's what drives obesity, is those external social cues rather than any sort of internal need to eat more. And if you think about it, just eating habits by themselves, our eating habits are influenced by thousands, if not millions, of different factors. Who we hang out with, what our families like to eat at home, what we have access to, right? All of that. So let's talk about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, because we talked about physiological and we talked about social. Maslow breaks it down into a pyramid, right? And he says you can't get the higher parts of the pyramid if you haven't taken care of the lower parts of the pyramid. And this is something to think about in school, right? If somebody isn't getting food, if they can't breathe, right? If they haven't had enough water, if they have to use the bathroom, can that student, right, focus on what needs to happen in school if they need to use the bathroom or if they need food or if they haven't had breakfast, right? And the idea is no, that they can't, right? Like you can't focus on these higher parts of the pyramid if you haven't already taken care of the lowest parts of the pyramid. So physiological is first, right? But then safety, right? Security of body, of employment, of resources, morality of the family, of health, of property, right? If you don't feel safe, if you don't feel secure, if you don't have those feelings of safety, of security, then you can't focus on those higher pieces, right? Love, belonging, you have friendship, you have family. And those things are important too. If you do not feel like you belong, if you do not feel like you have a social connection to people, you can't focus on the next part, which is self-esteem, confidence, achievement, respect of others, respect of us by others, right? And then finally, we can get to self-actualization, which is the stuff that teachers want you to do, right? Morality, creativity, spontaneity, problem solving, lack of prejudice, acceptance of facts, right? If you don't, according to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, if you don't take care of all four of those other pieces first, I can shout at you to do your homework till I'm blue in the face, but you won't be able to. And that's his contention. And overall, Maslow's hierarchy of needs seems to hold up, right? Across a large stratification of society. There are obviously people who can skip a step or skip a couple steps and manage those sorts of things, but they're rare. For the most part, most of us need to be we need to have these first four taken care of before we can start focusing on those other ones. And if you don't believe me, try skipping breakfast one day and see how well your performance in school suffers, right? Or in other places. So biological and physiological hunger factors. Let's just look at hunger, right? We're just going to break down hunger. We're just going to talk about that. Biological and physiological hunger factors. Our body and brain send cues that cause us to eat, right? According to biological and physiological stuff, that's it. The stomach, the liver, the intestines, they all send hunger cues. The hypothalamus in the brain receives those cues from your organs and it says, hey, time to eat. That is one thing that's happening. But there are other pieces going on too. There are genetic hunger factors. These are inherited instructions found in our genes, right? These determine our metabolic rate. Uh, Everyone has to have a set point, a certain level of body fat that our bodies strive to maintain. It is constant throughout our lives, right? And everyone's a little different. Like some people just have metabolisms that allow them to eat a huge amount of food and never put on any pounds, and other people, most of us, don't have that. And then there are social and psychological hunger factors too. These are things that you learn about eating, things that are taught to you, right? Example, eating while watching television. Some people do that, some people don't, right? Peer pressure to stay a certain weight. There are social and psychological factors to hunger as well. And I think all of us probably understand that too. Now, the next thing we're going to talk about is sex as it involves motivation. Right? Is the desire to have sex biologically motivated or socially motivated or both, right? I mean, physically, for most people, sex is biologically motivated, right? Hormones are secreted that control sexual interest. But there are social pieces that factor into it too: status, peer pressure, money. All of these things play a part. So motivation is not just physical, but it is also social, right? There are other elements that factor into. If you don't believe me, like, take a look at the influence of gender on sexual motivation. And we've got a chart here. And I think for the most part, the chart holds true. It's not entirely accurate. Obviously, there are people who can break certain molds, right? But as a general rule, men are considered to be more interested in sex, tend to want more partners, tend to desire less emotional commitment, focus on youth and physical attractiveness, and feel jealous for physical unfaithfulness, right? Whereas females, on the other hand, tend to be less interested in sex, tend to be not as interested in sex with multiple partners, desire emotional commitment, focus on social and economic status when choosing a sex partner as opposed to physical attractiveness, and feel more jealous when the partner is emotionally rather than physically unfaithful. Now, again, these are generalizations. They don't necessarily hold out and hold true for absolutely every single person on the planet. And there are many people who break the mold. Additionally, there are other social motives, the need for achievement. So some people desire to set challenging goals for themselves and persist in trying to reach those goals that might seem impossible or might take years and years to achieve, right? And that need for achievement, right? What role does it play in the life of a high school student? Right? Some people might need that achievement. There's additionally, you have the fear of failure, and that's another social motive, right? How can the feel of failure impact your motivation, right? If somebody has a need for achievement, desires to set challenging goals, and persist in trying to reach those goals, they might bite off more than they can chew, and they might consistently be fighting for goals that are going to be very hard for them to reach, and they might stretch to reach those goals. But a fear of failure might condition somebody to not take on things that are dangerous. Maybe they don't want to take that college level class because they might not get an A in it, and that could wreck their GPA, right? So fear of failure can impact your motivation as well as a need for achievement, right? Both of these are things we understand. And now on to emotions. Emotion is a set of complex reactions to stimuli involving subjective feelings, right? Subjective means they're our own personal feelings, right? Physiological arousal, and that does not mean sexual arousal, right? Physiological arousal we've talked about this, could be a faster heart rate, right? And also observable behavior, right? So motivation is the source of our behavior, right? Emotion is the feelings associated with our behavior. So emotions can function as motivation, right? Somebody might hit somebody else because they're angry, right? Maybe you hit someone because you're upset with them. Some people hit people because it makes them happy, right? These are the motivate. The behavior is the same. Somebody's getting hit, but the emotions behind the behavior are different. Now, there are 4 components to emotion. First, there's you interpret, you appraise some sort of external stimulus. Example, let's say a shark, right? Let's say it's a serious threat, right? So the first step in the first component of emotion, not first step necessarily, but the first component is that there's some external stimulus that you see, feel, or get to react to. You then experience a feeling, which could be, fear, terror, So there's a feeling involved in emotion as well. And then there's a physiological response. Again, maybe not in that order. Heart rate or breathing changes. And there are observable behaviors as well: crying, panicking, freezing, grabbing a harpoon gun and trying to shoot the shark in the face. These are all, observable behaviors. And there is a huge debate, right, when we're talking about these four, interpreting or this external stimulus, the feeling, the physiological response, the observable behaviors. There is a huge debate on the order in which these four basic components occur. So there are different theories on emotion. There are different ideas on how emotion works. So first, the physiological theory. Second, the cognitive theory. Let's talk about the physiological theory first. The main belief is that emotions derive from physical changes in the body, right? So physiological changes may not cause emotions, but they certainly increase their intensity. So fear is heightened when your heart races, or when you get a panic attack. Cognitive theories of emotion say that emotions result from mental processes and physiological changes working together, basically saying it's two things in tandem. And I tend to lean more towards the cognitive theory. It just, generally saying if there's more, the more working pieces you can throw together, the more likely it seems to me that's the way it goes. Just the world being as complex as it is. Universal facial expressions. Paul Ekman said that some facial expressions are universal. That if you go throughout all human cultures, there are some facial expressions that absolutely everybody has. That everybody, no matter what your cultural delineation, that those facial expressions hold true. And everyone has them. About 10 to 20% of people can hide their true emotions and not let us see those facial expressions. And a question that I think is maybe important to all of us is how can this information help us, right? What can we do with that? And here they are. These are the 7 facial expressions that are universal to everyone. Now, that is not to say that there aren't variations, and you'd have to look at the work of Paul Ekman to see exactly what is universal. But in anger and fear and sadness, surprise, happiness, disgust, and contempt. But all of these facial expressions exist in all cultural groups. And that, psychology students, takes us to the end of this week's Edpuzzle. Take the quiz, and if you have any questions, feel free to contact me, shoot me an email, meet me in Google Class or the Google Meets for office hours, whatever you need. And we'll see you later.